Assalamu alaikum, welcome, hi, and welcome to the Virtual Open Iftar 2021. Thank you for joining us on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. My name's Adnan, and I'll be hosting today with Farah again. Hi, Farah, can you hear us?
Hey, Salam, everyone.
Great. So we've got an exciting event planned today, and we have a speaker as well. We're gonna introduce a little bit later on. But before we do that, I want to be able to thank our media partners first and foremost. So Islam Channel have really helped us today. So special welcome to all of our guests from Islam Channel who also have their Facebook and YouTube on as well. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Also want to be able to thank Arts Council UK, who's been exceptional with the help and support this year. Without them, we really couldn't be here and do the work that we're doing. I also want to be able to give a shout out to Ramadan 10 Project ourselves. You can go online and check out some of the amazing work that we're doing, but also you can get involved with the My Open Iftar packs for 2021. Most of the information is available online, so if you just go into rtp.com, you can see all the amazing work that's happening with the My Open Iftar packs as well. And the next thing to say really is, well, this, for those who've joined before, this is always an interactive session, and we want you to interact with us as much as you possibly can. Therefore, turn your cameras on. We like to see who's available. We like to see where everyone's from, and we want to see what everyone else is up to as well. So let me go through a bit of house rules for using Zoom, just to start with. For those that are using mobile phone, you might see a reactions button also on the laptop as well. At the bottom, there's a reaction section. You can click on that, and it gives you a couple of different options. You can get a clap, you can get a thumbs up. There's also an option to raise your hand. So you can use this function to be able to interact with us if you don't want to use your video. If you want to ask a question, for example, again, you can raise your hand and we can get you on. There's also a chat section, and we heavily encourage everyone to be able to get involved, just interact with us over here. If you have any questions, you can ping that into the group chat, but also you can ping, myself and Farah separately as well. So I think that's all. I think it's time to get into the agenda for today. So Farah, I'll pass that on to you.
Hey, Salam, everyone. Thank you, Adnan, for a fantastic intro as always. And for those who are watching from Islam Channel or on Facebook or on YouTube, we would love to hear from you. So you're very welcome to jump on the Zoom, go to Ramadan10project.com, click on the link, jump on, and especially if you have any questions for our speaker. So today, we're going to start off with hearing how everyone's day is going, how their fast going, how their Ramadan is going. And thank you, Magda. I hope you're having good fast as well today. We're just looking through the chat box there. Keep it interactive, everyone. So today's agenda is we're going to start our talk in about 5-10 minutes or so by Mete Coban, following which we're going to have a Q&A, and then Adhan is at 8:10. And for those who don't know Mete, we're going to do a full introduction later before he speaks. So how's everyone's day going? Adnan, how has your week been? I can't believe we're already halfway through. It's like, where's it gone? A week into Ramadan now, right?
A week into Ramadan. But not only that, I think this week has been exceptionally busy now. I think we've been hosting every day for the last 3 days. And also, I think, everyone's been working and stuff as well. So for me, it's been busy. I have to admit, it's been super, super busy. And I think, how like normally your phone tells you how much screen time you've done. I haven't actually counted how much screen time I've had with just my laptop. I think it's probably been like 12 hours a day, maybe more. So I think that's one thing I want to be able to try and be more mindful of and think about at the end of the week. Aside from that, I think, 1 weekend, it's gone quick. I'm pretty happy with where we are. I think, it's pretty interesting and pretty good. What about yourself?
You're right. It's been an absolute fun week, absolutely mad, and an absolute fun week as well. We've had fun with Asma from Darjeeling Express, and then Shamil and Chef Naved yesterday. Lots to talk about food. So today we're going to move a little bit away from food. But before we do that, it's let's see what everyone's having for iftar today. Now, Magna's having grilled fish, stuffed vine leaves, rice and noodles and salad. That sounds absolutely delicious. And Iman, Molokhia. Iman, we're going to put...
Molkhia. Iman, you got to come on, because we were in Egypt.
About this. Yeah, I really want to know about this dish and how to pronounce it correctly, please.
Well, it's called Molokhia. I'm sure Adnan knows about it now since he spent quite a bit of time in Egypt, so
definitely it came up with everything. I think it was served basically with bread all the time.
Yeah.
Every
But
time.
you could have it with rice as well and some roasted chicken. Unpopular opinion, some people like to have it with shrimp, which we used to have it sometimes when I'd visit my mom's family back home. But yeah, it's just one of those things I randomly saw like one day on Instagram. I was like, oh my God, I need to have some molokhia. So I sourced some from
For
the
the
shop.
audience, sorry, Iman, can you explain what it actually is? Because I didn't
it's-
actually get the concept of it first. I thought it was
I
spinach,
have
but it's
no
not.
idea.
So it's basically like, think of spinach, like it looks kind of like spinach, but it's not, and it's yellow. So it's just these leaves that you throw in a food processor, and it's kind of like a soup, like a really slimy soup. I know it doesn't sound as appetizing, but it's actually amazing. So you can cook it in like broth, and you can have it with lamb, you can have it with chicken, you can have the soup with rice, or you can have it with bread. It's a really, really simple soup. But
I agree. It was very
Wow.
slimy and like maybe controversial. I wasn't a fan of it. I'm not gonna lie. I was just being
Oh
very
my
hospitable
gosh.
and saying I really like this. but you're right. When you mix it in with everything else, it's okay. It's fine. It's just it's there.
A fun
You know what?
fact, I actually found this out recently, but the name Molokhia comes from Molokhia, which means food for like kings. So only like the elite used to have Molokhia back in the day. So, yeah. It's
Probably
too bad you
explains
don't
why I
like
couldn't
it,
handle it.
Adnan.
And do you know what? I'm going to ask you. Can you post the recipe in the group? So it'd be really interesting.
Oh yeah. I actually have a really simplified one that I
That'd
found.
be fantastic. Because Magda's also said that she's got some in her fridge. So Magda, we're going to unmute you, and you can tell us about how your day's been, how your iftar, what's for iftar, how's Ramadan going.
Yeah, my day's been really good, but now my mouth is watering because molokhia is literally one of my favorite dishes, and I don't have it tonight, but I've got it. I've got the leaves in my freezer ready for cooking another day.
Can I just ask, Magda, where did you get it from?
You can get it in Shepherd's Bush, or so my local shop is on the A3, but you can go to Shepherd's Bush. Are you in London?
I'm in Reading at the moment, but I'll make the trip down.
Your travel. Most Middle Eastern supermarkets sell it in the freezer section, so it's really convenient because it's kind of all ready to go. So you just cut open the packet and you can just do it in the broth so easily. But it's the most delicious thing.
Are you also Egyptian?
Yes.
Ah, okay. There's loads of Egyptians here today. Wow.
Are you, Iman?
I'm half Egyptian.
Oh yeah, I'm half. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a real taste of my childhood. It's so delicious. But I normally have it with rice and noodles. I'm having rice and noodles tonight, which if you don't know, so we fry these little noodles in butter.
Oh, the vermicelli noodles.
Yeah.
I know what rice you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a special Egyptian rice, but you can use sushi rice as well. It's a very short grain rice, and then just cook it as normal. And it's such comfort food. I think the two together, it's just so delicious. But let's stop talking about food because I'm literally drooling. But I've been really looking forward.
That was going to be Egyptian food next time for sure. So once everything's back to normal, I think I'm going to sign up to this for sure.
Do you know what, Adnan? Let's get Mete on. Because Mete, I know you have a similar background as well. So, what are your thoughts on molokhia?
Yeah, I love molokhia. I'm also Egyptian, but we haven't made it recently, but I love it. Yeah.
What are you having for iftar today, Mete?
We're having a bit of like leftovers from like a few days. So we have this like pie that we made that has like also an Egyptian meat called basturma, and some like vegetables and stuff, and some like leftover chicken and rice.
When I said I didn't like molokhia earlier, I was just joking. Obviously. Now there's 3 Egyptians around. Feel pretty.
Yeah, Adnan, you're going to get chucked out. But we can't say anything to you because you did such an amazing job with the cooking the other night. I was so impressed.
Thank you. It was all improvisation, honestly. At one point, she was like, "Oh, you got the recipe, right?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah."
It was brilliant. It was hilarious.
Adnan
Thank
was
you, everyone.
awesome.
Appreciate that.
So,
Right.
Adnan, what
Well,
are you having before we move on to Mete? What are you having?
what am I having today? So the leftover potatoes from the other day, my granddad made potato pies out of it. And there's a little bit left over. So super spicy, super carby. I'm gonna go and have that later on.
That sounds absolutely delicious. I think we're now ready for our speaker. It's
We are.
about 7:18. So we're just going to tell everyone about Mete for those who don't know. So Mete's a cabinet member for energy waste, transports and the public realm. He's also a councillor for Stoke Newington, a chair of the Skills, Economy and Growth Commission. He's a football scout for Arsenal and Southampton Football Club. And he also founded the all-party parliamentary group on a better Brexit for young people. So without much further ado, over to you, Mete.
Oh, thank you very much for your very kind introduction, and hello to everyone. And I just wanted to start by saying that the best mola here is in Cyprus. So if you haven't had mola here in Cyprus, then you're having something that's a fake version, because honestly, once you have the version from Cyprus,
They're shaking their heads.
Okay, that's controversial, Mete. Yeah. What's different about the one in Cyprus? Is it still spinach?
It is, yeah. It's just better, isn't it? You know,
there's no saliva, right? There's no saliva. Just tell me there's no saliva.
Honestly, it's
no slime.
You know, and yeah, no, it's really good. Honestly, like in a Turkish Cypriot household, your fridge is stacked with halloumi and here. So
halloumi, you can't go wrong with halloumi.
No, you can't. No, but
okay.
Yeah, sorry guys. If you haven't tried the Turkish Cypriot version, do try it, because.
Okay, where can we try it from? Do you have any recommendations other than obviously your house? So.
I was just about to say that.
Right, Adnan, we're going to Mete's.
Yeah.
Middle of May. We're coming, Mete.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I don't think you can actually. Never been to a restaurant where they actually serve mola here, but. But it's really nice. Actually... If you've got a Turkish Cypriot friend, tell their parents, their mum, to make you a mola here, and you're gonna love it. Trust me. Yeah.
Do we have any Turkish Cypriots here on the call right now? I think that'd be quite interesting. If there is, I mean, put it in the group chat or raise your hand and with the function.
And if anyone's watching online who is Turkish Cypriot, jump on the Zoom.
Definitely.
Love to hear from you. So we're ready for your talk now.
Great. No, thank you. I just wanted to kind of put that out there. But now, look, listen, firstly, I wanted to thank the Ramadan Tent Project for all the work that you do. I know you've been working for years. I remember when I was a student a long time ago. I'm going to be giving away my age, but when I was a student, 2011. I remember sort of those days when, 2011 to 2014, where you were doing lots of great work since the SOAS days. And then you obviously now, it's amazing to see the transformation, all the way to sort of the Trafalgar Square, and obviously your recognition and, by so many different institutions. So it's brilliant the work that you do to bring together so many different communities during Ramadan to sort of break bread. And, thank you for all the work that you do. And thank you for inviting me to speak. And this is, I think, my second or third speech now. Third one, actually. I had one in person 2 years ago before the pandemic in 2019. And then last year online, and then this year as well. So very honored to be here. I wanted to firstly introduce myself, and then I'll tell you a bit about what I wanted to talk to you about. So my name is Mete. I've got a few different hats on. So I'm a councillor for Stoke Newington since 2014. So I'm my second term, and I'm also a cabinet member for energy, waste, transport and public realm. It's a lot, as you can imagine from the name. And I also run a charity called My Life, My Say, which is on a mission to empower young people to participate in democracy. And that's predominantly the reason why I wanted to talk to you. Actually, just on Monday, we had National Voter Registration Day in the UK, where we had more than 80,000 people who registered to vote. And we've reached more than 500,000 people in one day, which is phenomenal. And I'll tell you why that's important in a moment. But I guess let me start with a bit about my background and how I got into politics and why it was important for me to set up My Life, My Say, and to do what I do right now. So in 1995, roughly about 95, my parents moved from Northern Cyprus to London. We moved here because my brother was born with a broken foot, which was stuck to his shin, and when the doctor tried to fix it, he lost the equivalent of 6 centimeters worth of bone, and eventually my parents faced the difficult decision of, whether he would be amputated or whether they would have to take the risk for him to have surgery, which was very rare at the time, which I think there was only 3 cases in the UK before. So my father came in 94, and me and my brother and my mum came in 95. So I was only about 2 years old back then. And, when we first came here, we moved to Hackney, which is where I'm from and where I'm very proud to be from, and where I've lived ever since. And, Hackney was a unique place because, it's a very diverse place. So we immediately felt at home. And it's also known as the world in one borough, so it was very easy for my parents to kind of it's very difficult coming from a very small island where you've only got about 150,000 people to then all of a sudden find yourself in a city where it's like, the most important city in the world, one of the most biggest cities in the world. And obviously it was quite an experience for them. And whilst we kind of felt welcome, little we knew about some of the problems that existed in our new home. Had one of the highest rates of crime in the country, one of the highest rates of poverty in the country. Actually, between 97 to 2003, half the schools shut down in Hackney because the schools were so bad because the government intervened. I couldn't go to school in my borough, so I was one of 63% of 11-year-old pupils who had to go outside of Hackney to a neighbouring borough to study because all the schools were shutting down. It was actually so bad that in 2006, not lying to you, 2006, true story, a UK broadcaster ranked Hackney as the worst place to live out of 434 local authorities in the UK. I guess when you fast forward that now to 14, 15 years, the transformation has been unbelievable and unthinkable. You're talking about, it's got, the home of the tech hub, London's nightlife. You're talking about, home of the sort of the creative and fashion industries. We actually achieved the best secondary school exam results in 2017, and compare that with sort of 2003 of half the schools shutting down. It's quite a phenomenal sort of journey. It's known as the hipster part of London. The transformation has been unthinkable. And, for me, what was really important was that, someone who grew up on a council estate, I often felt, in many ways, I felt really powerless and, felt really neglected in many ways, and felt like my voice didn't really matter. I don't know, like when I went to school in Waltham Forest, people looked at you different because you were from a certain part. They made a lot of stereotypes about your parents and their jobs and everything. So for me, it was just that constant feeling of like no one really cared about what we were up to in Hackney, and also just being from a council estate as well. So that's a bit about how, that's where my passion came from. And it was a tipping point in I think I was about 15, where I used to go to a youth club after school every day, literally every single day from like 4 o'clock all the way to about 9 o'clock, maybe 5-6 times a week. And that youth club shut down. And when that youth club shut down, I just couldn't understand why. Like, I was just like, why is this youth club shutting down and no one's saying nothing about it? And it was really, that gave me that passion. So for me, I didn't want to be the person who stood there and complained about things. I wanted to do something about it. And that's why, I founded My Life, My Say, really to help give young people, empower young people to stand up and be counted about their futures, particularly for people who look and sound like me, who often who are often overlooked in decision making. And, I'll tell you a bit about what My Life Say does a bit after, but I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to be a voice. I often entered like so many different discussions with so many different people around, understanding what role I could play in society. And I was a little kid then. I was probably about 18, 19, not trying to understand where do I fit in this world. And it was only until someone really pulled me aside and said, potentially look, like you should potentially consider running for elected office. And they told me about the role of a councillor. I didn't really know what a councillor did before, because I was quite involved in my local community anyway. And then I took the decision and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And I put myself forward. I was 20 at the time. So, back then I was very fearless. Sometimes I think about it now, I don't even I don't know where I had that courage from, but I was only 20 at the time, and I put myself forward, and then was elected as the youngest ever councillor in the history of Hackney at the age of 21. And since then, you know, I felt it was really important to really make sure that I'm using my voice to stand up for people who, as I say, who look and sound like me and who often don't have a voice. So one of the reasons why I wanted to run as a councillor was because, for me, when I described that growth to you in Hackney and that transformation, you know, people often talk about gentrification in different parts of London. And for me, the concern that I had was that, you know, we've lived here through the sort of the worst days of Hackney, and now it's getting better. Like where I am right now in Olympic Park, where I'm sitting exactly right this moment, used to be an old abandoned dog track. And on Sundays, it used to be a Sunday market, which basically people used to come in and just buy all sorts of things. I remember coming here every weekend with my brother and buying PlayStation games. And, you know, now the building you can see already, lights behind me, this was the broadcasting center of the Olympics, massively transformed. And so for me, the big question mark was, great, you've got growth, but then the question is how inclusive is this growth? Is it for the people who are actually from the area, or is it for people who are just moving into the borough? And the reality is that whether it's true or not, people's perceptions and feelings are that it's not working for people in the borough, but it's working for people outside of the borough. And that's something that we have to work to change. So I wanted to be really at the forefront of that conversation. And through my role as leading the Skills Economy and Growth Commission in Hackney, I led an inclusive economy inquiry into understanding more about, you know, how we could tackle socioeconomic inequality and how we could build a much more inclusive economy in which we change the kind of the metrics in defining success of growth. And, you know, through that program, we've been able to get thousands of people into employment and to jobs, so which has been extremely successful. So that's sort of the mission that I've seen myself as a local councillor, which is about, you know, being a voice for those people who, as I say, like me, who unfortunately didn't have the greatest of upbringings, but, you know, we're able to benefit from a lot of the opportunities that come in into Hackney. And for me, it was always going to be much more about that. It was going to be always about, you know, what more can we do at a national level to kind of give people a voice. You know, we look at everything that's happening around the world right now, whether it's from the pandemic. You could see already that the pandemic has exposed and amplified so many inequalities across our society, particularly for young people, whether it's, you know, our mental health, whether it's, you know, our jobs. You know, I don't know if you've all had the opportunity to see a couple of weeks ago, but when the Office for National Statistics published data on how many people have fallen off the payroll, I think over 63% of them were young people. So it just goes to show you how many people have lost their jobs, because obviously young people are more likely to work in insecure hospitality sector, which obviously got hit the hardest, or the events and, you know, different sectors as well. So that's obviously a big problem for our generation. As I say, the social life aspect, the mental health aspect, and the reality is as well, it's like, you know, many of us from that generation will know as well, is that every 5 or 10 years, something seems to happen which, you know, keeps setting our generation back. You know, whether it's the financial crisis in 2010, whether it's, you know, let's see what's going to happen with Brexit, obviously the austerity that has been carried out in this country for years. You know, the average first-time buyer in this country, I mean, in London, for example, is 39. The average first-time buyer of a property spends 420 grand on a property. The average first-time buyer for property requires at least on average about 100k deposit in London. I mean, who on earth could, you know, afford that nowadays? You know, these are the big problems that faces our generation. And obviously with COVID happening, I think it's causing a lot of people to think about more about their life, their purpose in life, and everything that's happening. So for me, what I'm really passionate about is making sure that we give those people a voice in shaping the future, because we can't just allow, you know, the way I see it is what's happened is obviously incredibly sad, and, you know, millions of people have lost their jobs. You know, people have died. My cousin died, for example, from COVID-19. You know, she left behind a beautiful daughter at the age of only 6. It's been a very, very emotional and very draining moment for a lot of people during the pandemic. But at the same time, you know, this is an opportunity for us to really rethink what society can look like. You know, it would be such a missed opportunity if we just sort of went back to how things were. And, you know, when we always say going back to normal, we shouldn't be going back to normal. it should be building a better normal. And that's the real big question that we all got to sort of answer. And the worry I have is that we'll just very quickly, routinely just move back into what we were before. And all this time of reflection that we had will have gone for nothing. I think this is a really big pivotal moment in the history of, humanity. And I think we ought to sort of make it count. And that's why My Life, My Say for me is extremely important, because it's all about empowering young people to have a voice in shaping their futures. So I set up My Life, My Say in 2013 with the ambition of bringing together people who didn't necessarily think the same, but can come together in a room and talk about issues without necessarily feeling the need to attach themselves to a political party or to any sort of ideology, but just can talk about issues. And since then, obviously, we've grown tremendously. And one of the things that we're best known for is something called democracy cafes, which is a concept that we work collaboratively with Starbucks. It's not exclusive to Starbucks, but the concept and the idea is basically to bring together 30 to 40 young people together in coffee houses in and around the UK, where they're talking about issues in the community over like a frappuccino or a cappuccino, whatever it is that you want to get. And you'll be surprised how much of a puller the frappuccino can be for young people. And so yeah, we've done over 400 of those democracy cafes over the past 6 years, I'd say. And then more than 80% of those democracy cafes take place outside of London. We've done about 14 of those across Europe, and we've also started to pilot them in the East Coast of the US as well. So we've done New York, Washington DC, and Philly. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, obviously that project got halted. But we hope to go back to America as soon as we can. And the democracy cafes are a great way of just our approach. Really is what it is. It's identifying where young people go to in their day-to-day social and digital lives, and think about how we can connect with them in those spaces, rather than trying to bring people to us. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a few examples. Is like, I come from a footballing background, and Farah mentioned I used to be a football scout, once upon a time for Arsenal and Southampton. Don't ask why I chose politics over football. I get asked that question often, but I did. And football clubs have community foundations which work with loads of boys and girls from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly around sort of employability and volunteering opportunities. And we work with loads of football club community foundations to engage with them around democracy, like the Premier League, the Football Association. Obviously, Starbucks partnership is part of that. In 2017, we ran a voter registration campaign where we were working with, Uber, for example, where if you're 18, 24-year-olds, a week before the voter registration deadline, if you ordered a taxi or an Uber, for example, within the first 3 minutes of ordering your cab, you would have received a notification to say, hey, have you registered to vote? And if not, can you click this link? The same thing we were doing with Tinder, for example, a bit more unusual partnership. But if you were swiping left or right, you got a notification to say, hey, swipe right. If you swipe right, you takes you to the government website to register to vote. So it's really about trying to identify where do young people go to, rather than creating that space and expecting everyone to come to us. And for this National Voter Registration Day specifically that we had on Monday, what we done was we worked with loads of influencers to get the word out, and it was very successful. As I say, we reached over 500,000 people. That's just directly through our channels, by the way, and more than 88,000 people registered to vote in a year where there's not a general election. And it's very difficult to do that in a year where there's not a general election, because it tends to be that a lot of people don't really care about registering to vote when there's no election. And it's a scandal, really. There's more than 9 million people in this country who aren't registered to vote. 9 million people who are potentially missing out on the opportunity to, change the course of this country. There's places like East Fife in Scotland, for example, where the majority of the MP won the election in 2017 by 2 votes. The number of people who didn't vote in that constituency was 16,700. So if 2 people out of that 16,700 voted, the outcome of that parliamentary seat would be different. Kensington, it was 20, the difference. Again, there was more than 21,000 people who didn't vote in that constituency. There's many more of that. In 2017, again, the number of people who didn't vote was 14.5 million. The number of people who voted for the Conservative Party was 13.8. Number of people who voted for the Labour Party was about 12.7 or something. So there's more people who didn't vote than that voted for either of the bigger parties. just shows you the big problem that we have in this country, and particularly for our generation. I think there's more than a third of young people missing from the electoral register. We know that, you know, partly that politicians don't take young people seriously, and that's partly because they know that we're not going to vote. So when they make their election pledges, you know, they tend to sort of target the demographics that they know are more likely to vote. And, you know, registering to vote is not just about, you know, it's not just about giving you that the power to decide your future. It's also about little things like, you know, helping support your credit rating. You know, if you're looking to get a mortgage, for example, it can help so much to do what you want to do. So for me, what I'm really passionate about and what I want to do in the next couple of years, I've been in this job now for how long? For about 9 years, probably, for my life, might say, and I'm 28 now. And, you know, I don't want to be the person who I recognize there's a lot more. Like, I mean, I'm very lucky to be in a position where I manage a team of 9 people who do this on a full-time basis. But I'm also I have a lot of self-reflection, and I want to give it on to other young people who, you know, who can lead this work. Because I think, you know, you need to be from that community to lead it. And the reality is, in a couple of years' time, I'm not going to be in that position to be the best place to do that. And for me, you know, what I want to do over the next couple of years is follow the American system, where, and that's why the National Voter Registration Day, sorry, I keep looking this way, and that's because there's a National Voter Registration Day sign there. That's why, in case you're thinking, why on earth is it keep looking there every time I say that, is because we know that we need to have like a systematic approach, 3 or 4 years, rather than sort of like, you know, coming up to an election and everyone's like, oh yeah, by the way, did you know that there was like, you know, 4 million young people missing from the electoral register? And then everyone's scrambling around last minute trying to put together a campaign. So what we're trying to do is really start to build some of those strategic key partnerships with businesses, third sector, influencers, brands, celebrities, and start building so that we've got a good system in place, so that when we get to a general election, we're hopefully going to get every single person voting. And that's what our aim is. So I could talk forever and ever and ever, as you could tell. But look, I'm really, really proud of the work that both My Life, My Say does. I'm very grateful for the support that the Ramadan Tent Project do, and Open Iftar, what you do is with the Open Iftar. I'd love to have you guys in Hackney, inshallah, once, like, you know, we progress to a point where once we're out of COVID-19 restrictions. I'd love to host you in Hackney. We should do a big Open Iftar in Hackney. Hackney is one of the most diverse communities, is the most diverse community probably in London and if not Europe. We have a huge Muslim community in Hackney as well. And, you know, some of the stories of like how we work together with different faith groups and or even people from non-faith it's just quite extraordinary, given sort of the types of demographics of people who live in Hackney. So you know, I really want to make sure that we're doing the best we can do to kind of bring together people from different backgrounds, you know, really trying to, you know, as I say, we're at a very important stage of our lives right now. You know, like this is a very, very life-defining moment where we're going to be deciding, you know, do we want a greener, a cleaner, inclusive future? Do we want to have more, you know, like better paid jobs? Do we want to have more like self-sustaining the housing? Like there are so many big question marks, you know, stuff that we don't have to no longer like kind of put up with. I mean, I one last point I'll make is I remember 27th March of last year, and I came back from America. I was in America, came back from America. I saw this headline which said, every single homeless, the rough sleeper, will be housed in a hotel, basically, when the COVID-19 pandemic broke. And because obviously there's a difference between being homeless and there's a difference between being a rough sleeper. Homeless is, you know, like, homeless could be anyone. You know, you could be renting and then you get evicted and then you're homeless. Doesn't mean necessarily that you're sleeping on the streets. And you could be living in temporary accommodation, etc. And then rough sleeper is people specifically who, unfortunately, we have on who sleep on the streets, and not always from choice, by the way. And for me, I mean, we've seen these, you know, this has been an issue that's been going on for decades, right? I mean, I've never not been in my lifetime, I've never not seen people on the streets. There's always been people on the street, rough sleepers. And I just felt, wow, like, you know, in the click of a finger, if we really wanted to, we can house all of these people, right? So why on earth has it taken us for us to have a pandemic to, you know, to finally for the pin to drop for us to start to think about real radical solutions on how we can help these people. Like, did we have to wait for a pandemic to happen for all of this to happen? And I guess I give you one last story, which is something that always continues to motivate me to this day. I was about 14, probably about 13, 14. And my father, he asked me to go to work with him. It was half term. And I always tell the story because it's something that, like, every time I talk about it, it makes me really passionate, emotional. And it always re-gives me that energy and passion to give me an extra year. And then I come back and say the same story again and I keep coming back again. But he said to me, Mete, come, like, let's come work. He goes, I'll treat you to some gifts on the way back home. I'm getting paid today. I said, cool. All right, Dad. And then went to work with him. And cut long story short, he was queuing up to get paid, like literally queuing up. He was doing construction. And his boss said to him, Ramsey, he's like, I don't really like the work that you've done today. So he's like, instead of giving you £300, I'm only going to give you £150. And I will never forget, like, literally, I will never forget the look that my dad gave me that day. And it wasn't because, like, I mean, I didn't care. Like, I didn't care about the gifts. Do you know what I mean? But to see a grown man to look at their child in that way, it was the most, like, horrible experience that you would experience. Like, I can't even imagine what he experienced, let alone what I experienced thinking about him. And, you know, there was nothing he could do. Couldn't speak English. He was working in a cash in hand job, so he had no sense of security. So he just had to take it on the chin and move on. And then I remember going, and I didn't want to say nothing because obviously, like, you know, I didn't want to make it awkward for him because it was already awkward for him. So I went home and I told my mum what happened. And my mum told me, she goes, I know, your dad told me. And then I was telling her, I was talking to her, and then she just said to me, like, look, sit down. I sat there, and then she was like, I remember she was like rolling out bread, and she just said to me, she goes, what more do you want us to do for you? She goes, like, we've come here, you know, me and your dad can't speak English. You know, we had a very comfortable life in Cyprus. We gave it all up for you, your brother, and your sister. Like, by then we had our sister as well. You know, like, he's done all sorts of jobs, like ironing, cleaning, everything. You know, what more do you want from him? And she's like, don't come and tell me your problems. She goes, go out there and do something about it. She goes, otherwise I don't want to hear it no more. And for me, that was the moment where I was like literally the pin dropped for me. And that was the moment where my life changed. And I thought to myself, from that moment, everything I do is to make sure that everything that my parents sacrificed for me was worth it. Because, you know, they come here, they can only take us certain far. And then obviously it's for us to kind of take that forward. So for me, that always serves as a reminder to stand up for fairness, to stand up for, you know, doing the right thing, and, you know, really to stand up for social justice. And those are the values that sort of I take with me in every day, whether it's, you know, being a counselor, whether it's representing my life myself, or it's just me as Mete as a person. So thank you so much for listening. Sorry for rambling on, but I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Mete. First and foremost, I think we have to thank you, you know, about your life and sharing the stories with us. I think that was incredible. I think there isn't anyone here that genuinely thought, you know, that was incredible. My internet's probably playing up a little bit, so let me know if it is. But a lot of the comments that I'm going through right now, I just want to read about the things he's involved in. Very inspiring. That's from Sarah. And there's a couple more questions coming up as well. But from everyone that's messaging in, that was genuinely a very, very, very emotional and also inspiring talk for sure. I have got questions, and I know Farah does as well, but I just want to ask a quick one as well. And this is more around my life, my stay, because I actually went to one of your events back in 2017. I think it was the UK general elections at that time. And this was in Excel, I think it was. And everyone that's getting involved or wants to get involved as well, what could you say to them? How can someone that's just wants to take that leap of faith, how can they get involved? What can they do?
So I guess the first thing to say is that, you know, politics is a very you know, there's a lot of things you can do in politics, and you don't have to be a politician to be impactful. In many ways, sometimes I find, you know, the good thing about my jobs is that it's two very different. So I get to be a politician, but then I also get to be an activist and a sort of a campaigner. So it kind of gives me both sides, or lobbyists, I'd say. And sometimes I'm way more impactful from the my life, my say side than I am as a politician, because I think when you're a politician, it's like there's a lot of relationships you've got to think about. You're obviously bound by your party rules, and there's a lot of questions that you got, a lot of loopholes that you got to work your way around. So what I would say is you don't have to be a politician to make a difference in politics. I think there's lots of different ways that you could do that, and it could be as simple as voting. It could be as simple as like participating in the petition, or talking about it on social media, participating in the debate. Could be you want to go further than that, and you want to stand for public office, and that's absolutely fine for you to have that aspiration as well. And you need to really make sure that I think you need to be able to answer two questions if you want to stand as a politician. For me anyway, I think there's two questions that if you can't answer, I think it's probably not for you. The first one is you need to firstly convince yourself that you need to go into politics with wanting to make the world a better place. If that isn't in your heart, then I think it could be a very difficult job. And then the second thing is, why you and no one else? So why you over anyone else? Why can't someone else do it? And I think if you can't answer that question, I think it's going to be hard for you to be able to convince anyone to why it is with you. And you don't have to overcomplicate. I think when I say that, I do say that with the caveat that I think sometimes for a lot of us, particularly those of us from ethnic minority backgrounds, I think sometimes we obviously, we downplay ourselves a lot, partly because of like the way the system sort of brings us up in society, and we often sort of question ourselves and our abilities. And I'm not saying that in a way where you should go away and think that you're not good enough for it, but it's a hard job. You're constantly having to manage relationships. I've got, for example, like through my social media, for example, I receive like regular hate from people, especially since I've taken up my new role. I was actually attacked like a couple of weeks ago while I was running in relation to a new transport policy that we rolled out, and some people didn't like it, so they thought it was okay for them to share my night running app route and then somehow find me and then try to attack me. Even just this Sunday, I was walking on the street and had like 4 people coming across and shouting in my face. So look, I mean, I've grown numb to it. It doesn't affect me, but it is quite a you need to thick skin. You need to learn that nothing's it's not personal against you because it's against Mete Coban. It could have been anyone else in your position. And I say, look, those are the negative things about it. But then there's also beautiful, like when you see, for example, like there's a family, for example, recently who have been going through this housing situation for such a long time. And I remember seeing we were able to help them in the end, alhamdulillah. And basically just seeing their little kids smile and look at you, like knowing that you can make a difference to that whole family. Those are the moments that like doesn't matter what money you put to it, like that family will forever remember you, and you'll forever remember what you've done to that family. And those are the things that make politics so special. It's the ability to make difference to people's lives, and it's the ability to make difference at a scale. That's what I'm very interested in. That's why politics is for me. But as I say, there's so many different things you could do in politics. You could be working policy. You can, like, if you're really interested about certain ideas, you can work, and you don't see yourself as a public figure, you can do that in many different ways. And I'm happy to, like, if anyone wants to reach out to me around some advice and stuff, I'd be happy to kind of help support in that way.
Thank you, Mete. I think there are some comments in the section as well that I've sort of asked to share your details and stuff. You can come back to that afterwards. But thank you again for giving both sides of the story. I think that's what I liked about that. It's being real. I'll pass on to Farah. I know she's got some more questions as well.
So first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so wonderful and inspiring. And one thing that really sort of hit home with me is something like the way I've always been brought up, and standing up for fairness, and giving a voice, making sure you give a voice if somebody else's voice can't be heard, and how important it is to be selfless in that way. And also, I'm really sorry you were attacked. Like you say, well, it may not have been about you, but it's still not the most pleasant thing to have done. And for us to move on to my question, the other thing that I found quite interesting is how we tend to downplay ourselves. And sometimes I don't know if that's a cultural or religious sort of thing, to be humble, to be grateful, to, you know, certainly from a religious point of view, you're taught not to engage in conflict and to be fair. But it's so important to say, to also big up yourself. And sometimes when you do so, one does get very interesting opinions on that as well. When you say, you know, when you actually acknowledge it, you know, I can do this or I can do that. And particularly for women, I find people do view that differently as a woman when you do sort of stand up for yourself and, you know, emphasize your skills and what you're good at. So, you know, I'd like your opinion on that. But my question is more about youth engagement. It really, really saddens me when I see teenagers just standing, aggregating on streets with nowhere to go. And, you know, the lack of youth spaces, I think, you know, really disadvantageous for them. So, you know, as a community, as Londoners, or just in general, what can people do to sort of get young people involved in their community? Because, you know, these are the voices of the future. And, you know, they're the ones who are going to be contributing to politics and policy going down the line, and hopefully reducing those inequalities that you've spoken about.
Yeah, no, very good points that you raised. And I think, look, going back to that question about the point that you made earlier, and I'll answer your question in a moment. I think some of it is systematic. And what I mean by that is like, you know, like even when we talk about knife crime, right? And I've seen it like in Hackney, for example, like some of my friends that I grew up with and some of the stuff that they've ended up in. You know, I'm not trying to make an excuse for what people do. Not at all. Everyone is responsible for the decisions that they make in their life. And just because you've had bad circumstances growing up, it doesn't, you know, exempt you from, you know, taking bad actions. Like, you know, I could have done bad things, for example, but I chose not to. I still, you know, and it's because of the values that my parents taught me, for example. But what I would say is that you take somewhere like Hackney, for example, where you're brought up, right? You go to school, you start up in a primary school, and let's say you take your journey, and it could be, I just draw you a picture of someone young, for example, who may be having problems at home with their parents. So they don't feel like they want to be at home. And that mental pressure it causes them at a very young, tender age. They go to school because of the things that's going on at home. Their behavior isn't reflected that well at school, but the school's not trying to understand why this child's behaving this way. Instead, what it's doing is it's punishing them for behaving a certain way. So they don't feel wanted at school. They don't feel wanted at home. Then they go to secondary school. That problem just carries on. Eventually, what happens is they finish school, they finish college, and, you know, at every big moment or stage of their life, they've never felt wanted or they've never felt at home anywhere. And then the first time someone comes and puts an arm around them, maybe of bad influence, right? But that's the first time that person has maybe felt like someone actually cared about them or whatever it was. Now, I'm not saying to you what they're doing is right, but what I'm trying to say to you is that unfortunately we live in a system where we focus too much on the symptoms, but we don't focus on the causes of what's led to that person getting to that place in the first place. So for a young person to end up in a position where they're, for example, offending, you know, the system's failed them so many times that's allowed them to get to that stage. There were so many interventions that could have been taken at appropriate times where we could have helped prevented that situation from arising. And going back to your specific point about confidence and these points, it's the same thing again. You know, like one of my friends, we often joke about it, but I say to him, I don't think it's funny. His name's Simon, and he goes to me, he always talk about it. He's like, when I was in year 5, he's like, you know, my teacher asked me, what do you want to be? And he's like, I told him I want to be I told her I want to be a pilot. And she said, be serious, Simon, you're from Hackney. Now, for some people, that's a joke, right? And maybe it is lighthearted. But if all you ever hear as a young kid growing up in a certain area is, you know, do you know what? Don't ask too much. Just get a decent job, pay your pay your bills and your thing. Don't ask too much. Don't take risk. Then inadvertently, whether you consciously think it or not, you're growing up in that mindset where the idea of failure and risk is something that you don't even want to entertain. Whereas, you know, you go to someone from a much more privileged background, they're much more risk averse, like they're much more, you know, likely to take risks. They're much more likely to fail. And there's nothing wrong with failing. When you fail, like I think failing is a great thing because it's an opportunity to learn from, like it's a learning opportunity, right? Because in order to learn, you need to sometimes you know, fail. And, you know, actually there's a lot of like venture capitalists who wouldn't invest into startups because unless the founder has had experiences of failing. Like literally, it's a true story. I know venture capitalists who would not invest money into a founder unless they've had like 2 or 3 bankrupt companies, because for them that shows that that person's been through difficult moments and has developed resilience. So what I'm trying to say is that, you know, inadvertently, without even thinking about it, unfortunately, the systems and norms that we live in has brought us up in such a way where, you know, we're not allowed to dream, you know, or we're not being encouraged to dream. We're not being encouraged to take risks. We're not being encouraged to fail. And there's nothing wrong with that. And unfortunately, that also, I think it's more complicated because, as you say, that also filters through certain cultures as well, you know. So I think it's a big issue that we definitely need to kind of tackle long term, particularly around sort of developing soft skills for children and young people. And then just in relation to your second question about the creating the spaces, I think that's why the Open Iftar is a fantastic, you know, that's one of those things that we need to be doing more of. I think there are things that the government should be doing, and, you know, like we should be doing as politicians, like, I mean, obviously government in this case, particularly around sort of youth centres. It's a scandal that they've shut down 670 youth centres since 2010, and they replaced it with, you know, what they called it NCS, which, you know, no offense to the NCS, and I have nothing against them. I've worked with them actually quite a lot, but, you know, it tends to be for privileged kids who can afford to not afford or can go away in the summer, where it's not suited for everyone who typically would have gone to their youth centre on a sort of a normal day. So I think there's things that the government could do, but then also I think there's things that we can do as a community. And I think sometimes the problem is we always wait for other people to do things for us. And sometimes we could just get together and start doing things that are good and interesting for children and young people. A good example I give you of that is completely unrelated. So please bear with me while I give you this this example. But there's when the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, when he first Sultan Fatih Mehmed, he was a sultan in during 1400s when they conquered Constantinople. He became a sultan when he was 21, and when he became the sultan, they said to him, his advisor said to him, because he set out his priorities during his premiership, and he said he wanted to conquer Constantinople, and they said to him, Sultan, like, you know, with all due respect, how are you going to conquer Constantinople when your father or your fathers couldn't do it, and back then the Ottomans were much more stronger? And his response was, forget it's Constantinople. He goes, I'm going to focus on myself, then I'm going to focus on my family and develop them, then I'm going to focus on my friends, and then Constantinople will come to me. And what he meant was that by that was, you know, he was talking about the idea of, you know, stop, you know, focusing on, you know, where you want to get to, set their objective in terms of the aim you want to get to, but focus on all the steps that you need to do to get there. And it's almost like you kind of forget where you want to get to long term, but you don't forget it. You got it in sight, but you never lose focus of everything you need to do. And this is someone, you know, like who spoke 7 different languages. He was a mathematician, he was a scientist, you know, done all sorts of things. I'm not sitting here advocating or promoting him or anything like that. It's more about just giving you a story of someone who believed in kind of self-development. And I think sometimes, like, we've got this in front of us, we've got access to everything in the instant of our fingertips, and we're just so, like, you know, and including me as well, you know, sometimes we just spend ourselves time just doing needless and pointless stuff, whereas we can be continuously learning about new things, you know, just developing ourselves. And we focus too much on results, and we don't focus enough on what we need to do to get there. So I think, going back to your question, sorry, that was a very long-winded way of answering your question, but it's really just to say, like, you know, I think one of the things that we can be doing is stop waiting for other people to do things for us. You know, if we want to do ideas to encourage to do things for young people, Open Iftar is a great example of that, and I'm sure that there's other things that we can do too.
So much, Mete, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, we can have it all, just, you know, through focus and taking the appropriate steps and being confident in ourselves and not being, you know, scared of failing or taking risks. And we've got about 8 minutes until Adnan, so I'm going to hand over to Adnan for the next question. So over to you, Adnan.
Thanks, Farah. Yeah, like you said as well, we do have about 7 minutes, but we'll keep it short just because we want to go into the Azan before that as well. I want to bring on Iman and Shabana, who have a question each, but will sort of, I think it's very similar. So I'll let them sort of ask each, and then we can go into your response after, Mete.
Sure.
I'm happy.
Should I go? Oh no, go on.
Sorry, go on, Iman. Yeah, you go first.
Okay. No, I'm just, I want to say thank you, first of all, for coming on today. I really enjoyed listening to you speak. You mentioned about getting more youth involved in voting and other spheres of the political, aspects of everything. I was just curious, because you mentioned about, using influencers on social media and that kind of stuff. And do you find that year on year that more youth are getting involved versus, maybe just like taking a step back and saying, no, we're just so jaded with politics, we don't want to get involved, nothing ever changes? Like, do you see any difference lately on like year on year, or is it still a struggle to get more people in the game?
No, I think it's improving. And I think, the more and more big life events that we have, like, I think, the Brexit referendum, I think what happened in America with Trump, I think obviously what's happening with COVID-19 now, I think it's starting to politicize a generation here. And people are starting to think that, many of the things that we took for granted, actually, things can easily go away from us. So I think more and more young people are becoming much more political. I always think that young people were already political, and what I mean by that is of course, as a young person, you care about whether you have a job that pays you basic respect or dignity, or you've got a decent roof over your shoulders. The problem is whether you see traditional forms of politics as a vehicle to address the issues that you care about. And partly the reasons why young people don't see traditional forms of politics as a vehicle is because, one, we're not educated about how democracy works. So being able to draw the difference between your day-to-day passion and what you find interesting to what's happening in Westminster, you don't really draw that parallel at a local government level. Number two is obviously because, politics isn't representative. We know, I'm not going to give the stats, but like the average age of a councillor when I first started to be a councillor was 66. It's a very, very still old white male dominated profession. And then the other thing is obviously politicians over the years haven't helped themselves by making promises that they don't deliver, and then obviously that leads to that sort of that trust issue between people and politicians. So I think in answer to your question, yes, young people do care. More and more people are caring. The problem is that we need to, they care about the issues, but I don't know if that's translating to kind of the traditional forms of politics. So like whether it's voting and stuff. And partly the reason why they don't is because, you go to like America, when Obama was running for election, I was there. People were queuing 8 hours to vote. 8 hours. They were planning 2-3 weeks in advance on how they're going to go to vote, like family trips to go and vote. Unthinkable, right? Like for that to happen in the UK. And partly the reason why is because he was an inspiring. We can, as My Life Might Say, we can do amazing campaigns, or all these different organizations can do amazing things. But the reality is in order to get people out to vote in mass, you need inspiring politicians. You need someone who's going to get you out your bed and say, I'm going to go vote today. And unfortunately, because of the leadership issue we have, because of the representation, that's been something that this country is lacking for a long time.
Yeah, good.
And Shabana, sorry. Mete, 30 seconds.
Mine's linked to what you've just been saying already. Thank you firstly for your talk and for sharing your stories. But it's what can we actually do to encourage younger generations to vote, and especially those from ethnic minorities? Obviously, you've touched on what happened in America, but it'd be great to see that happen here. But what can we actively do to encourage, whether it's our families or friends or communities, to actually register to vote and actually vote and make a difference?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is like just being on. The thing is, there's no harm of being on the electoral register. And you don't have to vote to be like, if you register to vote and then you decide not to vote. I mean, obviously, ideally you should vote, but if you don't, that's fine. As long as you're on the register, because that makes a huge difference in terms of like how them policymakers and politicians. Then it's a bit like the census, right? Like the reason why we had the census this year, the reason why the census was really important for people to fill out was because it gives an idea to government and to all these key institutions about the type of demographics that exist out there, so that when they're actually formulating policies, they've got an idea about the demographics that live in the UK and the sort of the classes and all that sort of stuff. Same thing as voting. It's like if you're absent from the table, then it's almost like you're not part of the conversation. So I think the best way to frame it is it's like having that opportunity to have a say. I mean, it's crazy and unthinkable. Like, I don't understand why we're even in a situation where we have to even convince people to register. I mean, people used to die to have a vote once upon a time, and I think just being empowered, as I say, there are other benefits that you could say, things like credit rating and all these different things, but fundamentally, I'd like to think that people would want to have their voices counted and have that option. Maybe they'll decide not to vote, that's fine, but maybe you wanted to vote, and if you didn't register to vote, then it's too late. So I think registering to vote is the first thing that everyone could do.
Thank you, Mete. Thank you, Shabana, and thank you, Iman, as well for your questions. Unfortunately, that is the end of the question and answer section. Thank you, Mete, for joining us and actually giving a great story and response as well. I'm going to hand over to Farah for the last couple of minutes.
Thank you so much, Adnan, and thank you so much, Mete. It's just been such an inspiring talk. It's been great, reading all the comments. Everyone's really enjoyed listening to you, so thank you so much, and thank you also to the audience. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. So in the last minute or so before Adhan, I just want to say thank you again to our media partner, Islam Channel, and the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. Now, don't forget to get your own exciting My Open Iftar pack and check out all the work that we do at RamadanTentProject.com and read about how we're fighting world hunger with Islamic relief at iruk.co/RTP. So Ramadan is a month of charity and giving, and we want to tell you about Launch Good's Ramadan Challenge. So with this challenge, you can automate your giving to support different projects as well around the world, and setting up donation amounts to give to different campaigns daily throughout the month. And for everyone who signs up to the Ramadan Tent Challenge using our link, RTP will give us a top up of $50 from Launch Good, and you can sign up for this. And the link is launchgood.com/team RTP. And that leads us nicely over to the Adhan.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. على الصلاة على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been fantastic to have Mete join us and with his inspiring talk. And any last words, Adnan, before we sign off for today?
As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to our partners again. Thank you for the new fans we have as well in Islam channel who are watching us on YouTube and Facebook. Mete has very kindly left his details as well in the chat section for anyone that is interested to get in touch. You can reach him on social media at Mete Coban 92, and you can also find more information on mylifemysay.org.uk. The information is available, and from me, that's all.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.